Okay, we're back again. And today is going to be another one of our patented lightning rounds, which in Jen and Kyle timelines is still quite long.
Right.
We've got
Yeah.
a little under an hour that we're going to limit
Oh,
ourselves to today. So,
true lightning round. Yeah.
what's the topic? Burnout.
Let's talk burnout a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
For the last few years, my January has been I keep getting into these conversations about what complexity is and systems and social justice and um, narrative research and all this. And I'm going to all the Complexity Lounge events and I'm going to weekly COPs, and we're just talking and sharing, and I'm networking with people. And then January, something happens almost every year for the last like 5, 6 years now. And I just go, all right, enough. I'm just gonna like dial into the NFL postseason and like just do like neck down sort of exist for a bit and not be overwhelmed by trying to absorb all of this. And this last January, it didn't happen. I was still pretty energized. I was ready to run, and uh, there's something now that's starting to catch up with me into June, where I'm like I just kind of want to play video games for a few weeks and just not think about any of this stuff. I'm compartmentalizing a little bit in my calendar and having some restraints there, constraints there. But yeah, I thought that would be it's what's top of mind for me at the moment. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of dip into this because yeah, I'm certain I'm not the only one out there that's like mentally fatigued. But why we say mentally fatigued when that also is physical at the end of the day? Because I'm feeling it a little bit there, but I'm sourcing it from just it's between my eyes right now.
So, I mean, I have many thoughts.
Please.
Oh, even if you don't say please, they're coming anyway. Well, but okay, there's sort of two. I don't want to lose either of these threads. One is how any person individually avoids or preempts burnout, or when they arrive in that place and feel they're experiencing it, whatever they do. So there's that, but there's also just like what even is burnout? Because I mean, I'll just say what I said to you before we hit record, which was I think every single person I know right now is experiencing some form of burnout,
Mm-hmm.
except me. I have in the past, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
feeling that way right now. And we could talk about why that might be. But I'm also curious, like, did you, with the end of your last contract,
Mm-hmm.
did you just do nothing at all? What, like, you didn't take the time in January, but
Mm-hmm.
you often do, you said,
Yep.
which seems like a little bit of a preemptive or preventive kind of measure. And you didn't feel the need at the time or what have you. Um, but I'm curious, like, just I'll come back to my other thing. Did you get any time off at the end of your last assignment? Did you do nothing at all there? You just need to have like an end of contract video game 2 week like fortnight.
Something like that. That might have been it. Maybe. My last contract ended in the beginning of March, and the last 2 months was probably more active than the 10 months before.
Okay.
But it wasn't particularly taxing. Not in this way. Not because I wasn't doing anything interesting or meaningful necessarily, but it was it was more people coming to me and saying, "I don't know how to deal with this," and me saying, "I'm comfortable in this space," and so
Yeah.
it didn't. There was no stress there. Now, not working for 3 months, the navigation of the job scene is, I'm certain, a contributor, and it not being particularly fortuitous these days.
Yeah.
But it's also something that two things are coming to mind as we're talking about this. One is it's not just about the drain, but it's also about how the well is full, where I would go to for energy
Mm-hmm.
to ignore this. And I think that that comes from a lot of purpose, and I'm sort of self-determining that at the moment. It's not like that I'm accountable for something, and there are plenty of things I'm accountable for, but there's nothing like particularly energizing in this space that I'm accountable for, like work or project or managing a team or something like that. The other is, I bring this on myself. I'm always interested in finding people that are talking about this in different ways, and how do I generate a bridge or introduce a bridge or do some translation to say, you're not using the language that I am when we talk about complexity and facilitation and that sort of stuff, but you're using a language that is familiar enough that I think we've got some things to trade on, and we should have, like, we've got some mutual interests and we should meet. That is, I'm finding really interesting, but it also requires a lot of context switching and a lot of investigation and a lot of stretching, and that is probably one of the bigger things, because I've spent a lot of time doing that in the last few months.
Yeah, you're constantly building bridges.
Yeah.
When do you actually stop and just hang out on one side of the bridge for a while?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. And like inside, I've done this inside organizations too, trying to evangelize this sort of thing. It's how is what I'm talking about relevant to you, and not in a way that I want to be coercive or manipulative, but how do I find a connection that isn't apparent right now? So I've done that within the workspace, but I find that when there's a bit of, I don't know, there's an impetus to make those connections, that there's a source of energy there, or there's a support structure there, or there's a momentum there, but just doing it independently, very, very different.
Yeah, I'm glad you took it. I'm glad you basically shared everything you just shared, because, one of the things I think people tend to ask this question about burnout, which is usually like, well, what is it that's burning you out? Like, there's a thing like that's grinding away, that if you could just remove that thing, that you would no longer feel that way. And I mean, obviously being in a job that is taxing or stressful or exhausting, or whatever the, definitions of burnout you want to roll with, is like an easy place to look for that. But when you're not actively employed, or you're not in a full-time role or in a W-2 job, I think it's a little harder for people to like, what do you burn out from, And then if you can't point to being stretched too thin, which is kind of one of the next places people go, what else is there? And I have to say, being on the job market, hunting for a job or opportunities, listeners, like, everybody I know is looking.
Right.
The job market is god awful right now. It's like a weird.
Yeah. Or people are like you; they've gone independent and are constantly.
Sure. Yeah. Even people who are like not actively hunting for a full-time job, they're hunting and gathering for the resources that allow us to live. And so, like, I feel like if you were looking especially for jobs or contract opportunities right now, you could see that and go, oh, that's the source of your burnout. But like, I'm not hearing any of the, like, yes, you're probably sick of job hunting. That does get old, and it wears down on your sense of self and all that. But I'm not hearing any of that as like this main source of burnout. And I'm not hearing you say, I feel stretched too thin. Like, you didn't say any of those common culprits. It's kind of just got me thinking about, there's been lots of stuff written about burnout over the last decade or so, but this like traditional thinking around it being like unmanaged stress and exhaustion or something. And I just don't think that's it. Maybe, I don't know. Like, I feel like I don't know, when I felt it in my life, and what I'm kind of hearing with you as well, is less about unmanaged stress and more like, if you think about like high school physics, for those who took it, and if you didn't, don't worry, I'll bring you along, but you learn about vectors. You add two vectors that are pointed in the same direction, their magnitude just gets added directly. So, like 2 and 2, both north, would give you 4 north. But if you had them and one was pointed 90 degrees, like orthogonally, however you want to think about it. Well, actually, go the other way. 2 north and 2 south add up to what? to zero. They cancel out to zero, right? I promise this physics lesson won't last too long. And then like say some things like this, you know, the actual like the vector sum of these two vectors would be like a vector like this, you know,
Yeah.
which would be not quite two, but you know, whatever, you can talk about it details later. But I think of burnout, and what I'm hearing you describe kind of fits this a little bit, is that it's more that what is generative or energizing for you might be this, but the work you're doing is not totally aligned. And I think most of us are able to avoid work or obligations that are completely opposed to what we need to feel good in the world. I think things that are like really morally or ethically in the opposite direction are, I mean, that's the concept of like moral injury, you know, and there are people who are in those environments, military and other like trauma inducing environments. But like from everyday work, I don't think any of us are really at that level, but there's probably a lot of us who are at this level where what I'm doing and what brings me energy or joy or purpose or passion, they're not totally aligned. And like, what is perfect alignment anyway? Forget it. But I don't know. How do you feel about that? I mean, that's kind of me mirroring back what I hear, but I am intrigued by this because I have to assume a lot of people who might watch this feel that way right now for various reasons that might just not be able to boil down to like work is stressful.
Right. I think that's so. Two things have come to mind. The first is I think we won't find a single source because I think some of those things that you mentioned are like are viable. I've felt some of those things where like, yeah, work is just stretching me in a way that like I can't keep up with at the moment, and that's the source of my burnout. That's not it today, but acknowledging that that multi-sourcing of burnout is healthy. A healthy reminder that like not working and I've had a few of my friends get on calls. We're not working and like I'm exhausted. I don't know how my calendar is full today. I have more of a full calendar now than I did 6 months ago when I was working. How is that possible? And they're all like, yeah, me too. Like, this is hard work. This is a full-time job looking for a new gig. And so that assumption, I remember talking to the Europeans the first time I got laid off a few years ago and them referring it to fun employment. And I said, and I think in Europe that applies. But there's different, there's different anchors to our needs here in the U.S. where if you're not productive, that's your value, and so you're not entitled to other things that are available out there. Europe's a little different like that. Luckily, I don't have a lot of those stresses at the moment. But you went to vectors. I usually go to wave dynamics, and so I think we were talking about this like a month ago or so, and we were talking about you being out of phase. And that's how I see it when you've got two waves that you're combining because they've synced up on the same trajectory but not at the same frequency. Then every time one wave dips, it pulls down the intensity or the amplitude of the other wave. And
destructive interference for the physics.
Yeah.
Among
there
us?
you go. Thank you. Yes. Phase canceling for us sound nerds.
Yes.
But it's that off phase that is the drain cancellation of the amplitude of that wave. And that's probably it. That when I say task switching, when I say I don't want to say code switching. I think that's got its own place. But that's reaching and connecting and translation, very, very different. That's it. But I imagine that code switching has this very same drain.
Well, we talked at some point recently, and now I can't remember if it was here or if it was somewhere else, about the myth of multitasking, and that nobody really can actually multitask anyway, and that what really is multitasking in a lot of people's minds is just short bursts of task switching, and that's extremely taxing cognitively, and let alone, maybe emotionally and socially, depending on what you're doing. And that's like really well understood too. It's not even controversial, and yet despite the fact that it is not controversial, there are still so many people who either are convinced or have convinced themselves that they can multitask. Or in your case, you're not someone who I think is delusional about being a multitasker, but the dynamic you're describing, I think, is kind of related in that you're choosing to engage in all of these ways that there are lots of context switches, and it is cognitively taxing. And this is one of the reasons we've talked, I think, in some past episodes about how it does create a tension between wanting to operate in sort of trans-contextual ways, wanting to be a connector. People among us who, I think their whole kind of raison d'etre is to be a connector, to be in the interstitium, to be, boundary spanners, whichever phrases you like. And, yes, we all know that there is a cost and a labor to that is often unaccounted, and, it's free, it's unaccounted for inside businesses. But how about also just individually? It also is not accounted for. It sounds to me like you hit some kind of strategy with your Januaries. Now, whether you made that a conscious decision in response to some kind of reflection on this, or whether you just kind of happened upon it one year and said, that worked and it felt good, and I want to try to kind of repeat that. Sounds like that's kind of something that happened, and that this year, not having January as a kind of recharge or reload, or to me, it's not even the absence of the context or task switching that might just give you a rest. I have to imagine, you just said it, you're like, I just want to watch some stupid postseason football, doing a thing or two for a month or whatever it is. So it's not just the absence of the context and task switching, but it is actually just the deeper, I don't say focus, how hard do you focus on playoffs, but deeper focus into one or two modes of being. Because you can also just float at the surface and not do either of those things. And that, to me, I don't find that restorative. But it's that deeper, I am just living and breathing video games and football for 2 weeks. When people joke about, the gooch between that week between Christmas and New Year's or any other time, there's certain points in the summer or whatever, when people talk about become one with your couch. And the jokes abound on Instagram and TikTok memes and stuff. But I don't think that's as simple as just do nothing and recharge. I think it's giving yourself permission to really sink into one mode of being, which might be reading, which might be watching garbage TV, which might be doing things that are wholly uncognitively taxing. But it isn't just the absence of that. I think there is something more. So I don't know. I'm curious now. Are you going to take a January and July? Are you going to change? What are you going to do? I mean, I also am interested. I'll talk to you a little more about why I think I don't feel burnout right now.
Yeah, I want to know about your energy
source. Give our people some strategies, But what we are learning about this experience. But what are you?
So I think what happened with January was the first time it happened, I said, all right, I'm bottoming out and I can't resist this. And so I'm just going to steer into it. Yeah. And I think that happened 2 years in a row. And then after that, I just started listening for it. And whether it was apparent or not, I just kind of said, I think there's enough there that I'm just going to hit pause and drain a little bit. This year I was I'm ready. There's so much stuff I want to accomplish, and I'm energized, and I'm motivated to attack all this. But it is that the different thing. I need to work on my my portfolio. Probably, all of our portfolios are a constant work in progress. No, all right.
I don't have one.
Again, another anomaly here.
I've made a choice to exit a lot of that world on purpose. But yeah, go ahead.
That sounds awesome. So that self-representation for me is really taxing. Really requires a big shift for me to be a lot internally facing. And then represent it and translate it in a way that becomes broadly accessible. So that's one I've had on my list for a bit. There are a few articles that I've started that I want to get into, but I want to do some more homework. I want to read more about posthumanism, and at the same time, I'm as soon as I'll even if I flip on a podcast, I get 15 minutes into it, and I'm I'm not even paying attention anymore. This is more than I want.
What if you watercolor painted while you listened?
Well, that's an interesting, I'm going to take note of that. What if? That's an interesting experiment. That might be helpful. Uh, the although I've done s- I have a hard time. This is where like my work music is either ambient minimal techno, and there's no I can't listen to stuff with vocals because I
Yeah.
will pick up on on the words. Except if I'm pretty chill, it's going to be ambient dub techno usually, or it's just going to be dub.
Mhm.
Or it's going to be death metal that is totally incomprehensible and not particularly progressive. I want like
Yeah.
just I want
Or
Cannibal Corpse
drony
where
or
it's
doomy or
just
something.
exact. It's monodynamic, and that's fine because then it's just a wall of noise and I'm good with that. But I can't sit down and listen to Public Enemy while I'm trying to work because then I start hooking on the lyrics and it's too much of a distraction. So doing other things and trying to listen to a podcast has also never worked for me. I've never been able to work, but something like watercolor might be interesting.
Something, yeah, even something that doesn't require you looking at what you're doing. I mean, like
Right.
the doodling or whatever that we've talked about, or if you were going to do
Yeah.
watercolor but not really like paying attention to what you're making, just letting
Yeah.
the brush move, you know?
Yeah.
Um, because like we were talking, and those who are watching this, I mean, presumably you will have seen the previous episode. If not, you can go back and watch it for context.
Should.
But we just did an episode where Kyle and I, with Leander, did some watercolor painting. And the point of that practice was not to make the watercolor painting, but it is to just be in some kind of relationship with the materials. So I think that is intriguing. And I think if you expand that out to a bigger metaphor for the burnout, probably there's something to be taken away from it. I mean, I find that like okay, I have like a not even a working theory, maybe like a pre-proto theory. Actually, as an aside, the portfolio bit, I will say, I do feel that same way. I shouldn't be like, I don't have to do that. I do have to do that, but I do it now on behalf of
Right.
topology rather than Jen Brazelli. So I'm no longer maintaining a Jen Brazelli portfolio for conversations of worth about what Jen Brazelli brings to a situation. I am doing it now
Right.
as topology. And while it is almost one and the same, it's not quite because when we work on projects, sometimes we have people working like it's not just me, like some other folks are part of project teams, and so other people who are doing work with topology, like all topology as like a collective entity. So I get to kind of think of topology as the collective like cloud or fog and not just Jen Brazelli, which might make it easier, which might be part of why, but also it's just a different dynamic. And so there is that I will mention. And like I do feel that feeling when I am less busy on active client work, then I'm like, how can I be so busy? I'm not even working on a project right now. And it's the same thing.
Right.
It's just at like sort of the org version instead of the individual version where, oh yeah, I'm trying to like update our website. I'm trying to make new case studies. I'm trying to like figure out how to create some different marketing materials. I'm trying to reframe this thing or preparing a talk or a conference or whatever, you get it. So,
Mm-hmm.
but so I'm thinking as we're talking about burnout and thinking about the times in my life where I have felt it, and more often than not, it's been in places where I did feel very acutely that mismatch between time spent and things that bring me energy and stuff that feels like it has a purpose. And I think there is this like sort of tangent I don't really want to follow right now around the danger of trying to make your work be your life's purpose because I think you
Mm-hmm.
set yourself up for burnout because if you really need the work you're doing day in and day out for money to be your purpose, we've talked about this before, you, I think, invite much higher risk and much lower threshold for burnout because the likelihood of every little thing you're doing to be completely lined up with what brings you purpose is much smaller than if you can sort of contain to a more reasonable level your expectations for what your work for money, your exchange of labor for compensation is for, and then allow the other things that add up to your vectors of potential to come from other places. And maybe there's a conversation to have there that as in my life, I kind of moved away from early origins of thinking that I too needed to be somebody who felt like my work was my purpose.
Yep.
I haven't departed that entirely. Like I still feel like what I do drives me in a way. It's not like I
Mm-hmm.
close my laptop at 5 and don't think about it. But like I feel like I've reached a really healthy balance between Of course I think about my work all the time because I like the intellectual stimulation of it. So I
Right.
better damn well pick something I like thinking about because I know myself too well to know that it'll never not be that way. So I pick work that I feel is generative and interesting to me, but I also don't run up against the burnout as much because I don't find myself lamenting that this thing is or isn't lining up with what I want to be doing because I'm getting that from other places. But the word that kept going through my head to come back now and get off that tangent is like eating and food and nutrition and the way that some people seem like they approach burnout either on a big scale or even on little scales, during the week, kind of with food, you could eat one big meal a day or you could snack throughout the day. And if you
Sure.
are going to eat one big meal a day and you don't eat until midnight, you get to 8 o'clock and you're like crazy. Or you can substitute rest in place of eating. I like eating better though, because I feel like with rest, if you don't have enough rest, you can still force your body to do stuff. You're going to just be doing it in maybe a riskier and less effective way. Whereas with food, after a while, like you will just shut down and stop paying attention to anything except getting food in your body. Like, I think, you know what I mean? So with burnout, it's like we want to reach for the rest analogies because it is usually accompanied by exhaustion. But I don't think we can, like, as humans, see the connection in that same way because most people, like, yeah, I'm really tired, I should go to bed. Well, I might stay up and do this for another hour. Or like, I'm fucking starving and I can no longer think about anything else except getting food. So I'm going to actually take action and get food. I think it's just easier to go that direction. It's more of an active consuming of something nourishing rather than always a recharging something that is negative and has been, depleted. But the other thing I'll say in tying to that, and I'll be curious where this goes, I think the strategy of like taking a January, or like you said, at some point you started listening for it. Like I know a lot of people who, the minute they kind of start to get the inkling that they're feeling away, burned out or whatever, they've gotten pretty good at listening to those signals and not waiting until they're at the end of their rope. And they will then make a point at that point, an intervention, whatever. Maybe it's just taking a day off, a mental health day. Maybe it's, I need to take a vacation. Maybe it's, I need whatever. So the scale fits whatever the circumstances are. But in all of those cases, the people that I'm talking about, they still are like waiting until they feel it like on the doorstep. Do you know what I mean? And I think to an extent you probably can't avoid this entirely, but I don't even really like that. Personally, I don't like that because if I wait until I can feel it on the doorstep, 10 minutes later it's in the house.
Right.
And I'm actually, ironically that I've used this metaphor, I'm actually the same way with food and hunger. Like, if I wait until I feel hungry, 10 minutes later I'm about to be ravenous. Like, my hunger signals are just like that. I mean, but that's not true for everybody. Like, I know there are people who are like, I'm getting a little bit hungry, and then 3 hours later is when they really need to eat. So there's a probably an interesting metaphor to be had here in terms of like, in the world of eating and food, there's this notion called intuitive eating. There are ideas, especially coming from the world of disorders, eating disorders and disorder relationships with food, where you learn to reconnect and listen to your body's hunger signals, to not be freaked out by them, to listen to them, just take them as data and respond to them as appropriately. Metaphors abound here, guys. So like learning to listen for your signals of burnout, but I also don't even like to wait for that. I look at it like I'd rather just be eating snacks throughout the day when I get a little hungry, or, if I get tired in the middle of a day, take a cat nap. Again, not everyone has that luxury in their day-to-day work, but I mean the equivalent with burnout. So part of why I feel guilty that so many of my friends and loved ones are burnt the fuck out, either in their jobs, miserable, or laid off or looking for jobs, also miserable. I have a lot of serendipitously kind of luxury aspects to what I'm doing because my timing and making choices and things were good timing. But I also spread out my anti-burnout strategy such that, you know, I try to block every single week, I try to block a whole weekday. Most of the times I don't keep it. But in
Hmm.
the winter and in the summer in particular, I often will, or I'll at least keep a half of it. And in the winter I go snowboarding, and in the summer I go to the beach if the weather's nice.
Right.
Now everyone's like, "Must be fucking nice, Jen. Like, how out of touch are you?" And I'm like, "But hey, I mean, I didn't do this until I ran my own company, and I only run my own company because I took a leap, and I didn't have a bankroll for it, and I also don't have a spouse who makes enough money to support both of us. So it's not like people are always kind of assuming I had some kind of special thing.
Hmm.
No, man. Like, I just jumped off the cliff and make your wings on the way
Right.
down. So anyway, this is getting off on a tangent. But my point here is with burnout and burnout strategies, I think there are almost these camps of get smarter about listening, and when you start to see the signals, act proactively, which of course I'm all for. But I actually think it's one step further for me, which is it's kind of like an active, don't even get to that point. I never feel that way unless I literally have been working nonstop for weeks and weeks and weeks and haven't been able to like stop and do something else. And I credit it to I'm taking what you do in January,
Hmm.
and I have every weekend is a January for me. You know, sometimes a Tuesday morning at the beach for an hour and a half, and then I go home and then I work the rest of the day. But I've been at the beach and I've stared at an open body of water for an hour and a half. I mean, that's as good as like 6 weeks of therapy as far as I'm concerned. Like,
Right.
so I take the January and I spread it out throughout the year in the ways that
Hmm.
work for me. But I know people for whom the block of January is way more important, or the European summer of January,
Right.
or July and August of no work or whatever
Right.
is also what they want.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you?
So, yeah. So first, the sense your own body is interesting because this comes up in a lot of the ADHD conversations that I see, where that's just not. It is not all people that have ADHD, but there is a component of when you are sensitive to the stimuli around you. When you're a lighthouse, you're not. That's the where your attention is focused, and so I hear people talk about all the time. We don't. I don't feel like I'm hungry until I'm absolutely starving. My wife knows that I go from fine to hangry like that, and that's because I just don't have the sensitivity for it. I have a friend that's like, he is threatened by having accidents. Like he's got to dart to the bathroom because he doesn't actually get the sensation until it's overwhelming, and now he's in self-protect mode. And like those are the sort of like, can you sense your own body things that I don't know if it's trained or if it's just something that's there's a bypass there somewhere for a lot of us. But we try to do the eating thing with the kids where we're not trying to enforce. We do 3 meals and this is the time you eat, and if you get up from the table, that's it. Like we do exactly what you're talking about. Like
Yeah,
when you're
when you're hungry and not
feeling a
when you're
snack,
not. Yeah.
that's it, and not like a bunch of junk. That's not sustenance. That's not a response to hunger. The need for hunger is for nutrition and energy, and so that's got to be satisfied. So that's interesting. But I also think about my January has never been forced. It's always been me being probably more sensitive to it because it's easy to call January, where it used to be for me growing up in New York, it used to be seasonal depression. Now this is the time when I'm feeling a bit burnt out by all this sort of stuff. So I'm going to listen for it. So there's already a sort of pattern born in there. But if I were to force it, and I have tried to force it a few times, we're going to go on vacation, we're going to go to the beach, and I'm going to get these couple of books, and I'm just going to sit and I'm going to zone out, or I'm going to listen to just spacey music and just chill the fuck out. And it doesn't work. Like I get 5 minutes into it, and I'm like, I need to start doing some puzzles. I need to start like reaching out and connecting and doing other things, and I need to go exploring. I need to do something, but I can't just sit here anymore. Like, and I get squirrely about it even. So it's not something that I can necessarily force. That's why I kind of need the bigger block, or I need it to be overwhelming because that's what happened in January because it just didn't hit.
Yeah.
But what's also really interesting that I was thinking of as you were talking about, and this is the last piece I'll dip into, is I also consider one of my biggest sources of energy to be enthusiasm of people around me, not approval. Enthusiasm can be also like, I want to argue with that. That sounds like bullshit, and I want to call you on it. That's a level of enthusiasm that I respond to that says somebody else is impassioned by this. I'm a little bit more interested, and it's just like getting into one of those. I'm sure you've felt this. You can do this in small bites where you get into a conversation, and you find you're all of a sudden leaning into it more, and
Yeah.
so are they, and it just goes on, and then you realize it's been 3 hours, and you've just been geeking out about fuck knows what. That's something that I'm highly sensitive to, and what has been really great, what has gotten me into habitualizing all of the sort of I want to just reach out to people and have coffee chats and connect and figure out what you're doing that's in relation to mine, that kind of stuff. How do we keep that connection going? That's a part of that, knowing that that's my energy well, but also knowing that I spent a lot of time in the workplace, 8 hours a day, going in and saying, I'm thinking about this, and have people just dismiss it and go like, yeah, we don't do that here. That's not in line with our stuff. And then me not getting that energy, finding that elsewhere. But it's what's interesting to me is the number of people I talk to on a regular basis that are saying, I'm trying to do some new, different things. I'm trying to facilitate things in a different way, or visualize things, or support people in a different way. And it just keeps getting shut down. And I'm about ready to just resign all of it and just like start doing Six Sigma swim lanes or something. I'm just ready to just do what they tell me and not care anymore. That burnout is similar. I've learned to avoid that in the workplace, and get it elsewhere, and that can be through one of these like professional network or just like my friend group is all people that just enjoy geeking out and losing time through those sort of conversations. I was supposed to be the last thing I was going to say. I'm going to add one more note because I'm going to forget about it. But I don't think I've mentioned this here, but there's a story that I always stick to, or that's always on my mind when I'm talking about that disassociation. That's like, can I get my meaning and value from work? When I met my wife, have I mentioned this about the ring and the furniture?
I don't think so.
And her grandfather? Okay. So she's wearing this diamond ring that was peculiar. It's not your usual diamond ring. And so I inquired about it, and she says her grandfather made this. And I said, it's beautiful, interesting. And then I registered in my head that her grandfather was a jeweler. And I didn't really ask much more about it. This was like initial dating days, and we were kind of hitting all the touch points. I wasn't diving into anything deep. And then a few weeks later, we go to our mother's house, and we're walking around the house, and she's pointing at these different pieces of furniture. And she says, my grandfather made those. And they're like, this is like Amish furniture. It's like really well done. Now I'm confused, though, because this is really well put together. This is not amateur stuff. And the ring, I don't know if there is such thing as amateur jeweler that works with diamonds. So I'm saying, like, I thought your grandfather was a jeweler. Is he a carpenter? She said, no, he's a tax attorney. And I love sitting with that because I want that to be my story at some point. Nobody's like, yeah, Kyle, that was his title at that company. That was who he was. That's the sort of remnants afterwards that have that bigger component. So anyway.
Okay. Is that, do you want that, or do you want to like be that? I'm not trying to be like weird therapy here, but more like, do you want people to say that about you? Do you want that to be true for yourself, or do you actually want that life and experience?
I don't know if it's. I know that I can't control the narrative. That's not of interest to me, really. But I do find that I connect to something much bigger when I make stuff. And so it's not necessarily that like I want to be known for having a multitude of hobbies and, being eccentric and leaving these breadcrumbs around so much as I find it personally really gratifying to just make stuff, and it's primarily in music that I'm doing it, but anything really. And then what's interesting to me is the difference between the existence of that and the sort of day-to-day that I go through that spend a lot of my time doing with work and engaging in our capitalism. Will the stuff that I generate encompass the stuff that I spend more of my time and attention on because of where my passion is placed? That's more the question that I come back to with regularity.
Those are your vectors.
Yeah, here you go.
I can't help but not
Yes.
see it that way.
Yeah.
No, but I'm actually listening to what you're saying and not just looking for places to like put the vector metaphor down. I swear to God.
That's right. There's a tension in that. Now, like I think, like what you were saying before, what I was hearing you say was, you aren't focused on developing your work so much as the stuff that compels you. You've now been able to align with how you work and where your income comes from and these sort of things. And that's I think all of our goal.
Listen to how much I like. I mean, I hear it when I do it myself, almost to a cringeworthy level, how much I almost sometimes feel like I need to apologize. I don't really feel that, but what I do feel is like a really intense awareness of how lucky I am. And at all of the various factors, all of the many interconnected and entangled factors that have to play to make my ability to do topology for a living possible. So like, I'm not deluded into thinking that this was like just, you know, the story of one person's bravery to start a business that isn't even a big deal, but just affords her literally what you've just said. And I do know that there is some part of it that is fully me taking initiative and making decisions, whatever. So like, it's a marriage of the two. But when I hear myself talk about it and then feel the need to like caveat it a whole bunch, I'm finding that interesting even in this conversation, because I think what happens in conversations like this, and if I am sharing with someone who has asked me why I don't experience burnout much these days, and why I do feel what I'm doing is really affording me, it's literally what I'm interested in that brings me energy, the shit I'm reading about, the stuff I'm nerding out about. There's nothing that stops me from diving into it and then literally taking it and pulling it into what I'm doing. Whether or not I talk about it specifically to clients, but like, it's kind of like I just removed, or I found a way to get to a place where these barriers were removed. So everything's downhill for me in that we've been talking lately about, like energy gradients or whatever. Most things are downhill for me now. So I don't feel that banging my head against the wall, trying to achieve a change and it's just not going anywhere. I can't bear to push the rock up the hill one more time. Sisyphus is not fucking happy. Like, I hear that. I experienced that in my past roles. But I don't feel it anymore, because it was almost like I somehow got myself to like this magical environment where it's all downhill, or at worst flat, or when it's uphill, it's because I've said, hey, I think I'd like to push the rock uphill for a little while and have that experience. And usually, if I'm not careful, or if there's not enough context in the conversation, I know other people's brains, and I know this because of what they say out loud, go to the point of saying, well, that won't work for me. That's your context. You have your own business. You have the background, and you had a history, and you had the ability and the connections to make that possible. I don't have those things. And I hear people, and I get it, and I have total understanding and compassion for that, because if nothing else, it's all context dependent, right? Your context isn't my context. So like, my solution to burnout isn't to be like, for everyone, go start your own business. That's probably not going to solve your burnout. Like, that's not, you know, but my apology sort of mindset is not because I'm embarrassed about or want to minimize my accomplishments. We both know that's not a problem for me. I'm quite sort of confident and self-assured. But the reason I bring that up is because I do think if you are a person who even right now is really feeling it and you're in the midst of it, I think take something like what I've achieved as far as like being in a low burnout mode, abstract from what I'm doing or what I've described having done in like a professional sense, and just know that there are probably pieces of that that apply that I think could be meaningful. And these are conversations I've had with friends. So, I mean, if I could help everybody in the world never feel like that feeling again, I would, but that's not my goal, and I'm not a coach or therapist, so you're all on your own. But I do think being able to arrange the affordances that I have direct control over in such a way that I get to pull whatever I feel like pulling into my work, or whatever I am super geeking out about in my work, or in just day-to-day life, I can pull into my work. And like, to greater and lesser degree, I mean, I still have to frame things in clients' language. They don't care what I'm excited about or jazzed about. But I think even if you take the interest in systems and complexity, this was something that when I was at MadPow, we talked about a little bit, but MadPow was never systems thinking. Like, people inside MadPow were interested in these topics. But my ability now to say topology, ... complexity science. And like, eventually I probably won't do that as much, because complexity science and complexity informed methods and anthro-complexity are all gonna, follow the hype cycle, and in a couple years everyone's gonna hate it, and to put your name anywhere next to it will be a bad move, and I'll have to change the branding or whatever, which is fine. But it's not, what I'm doing with topology is not branding and strategy choices. It's truly like, this is what Jen's into. So, and Jesse, I should be fair to my business partner, but it's a lot of find yourself. Oh, there's that really good quote from Deleuze and Guattari about, I actually might have it handy, but this is the solution to burnout. Like, I'm going to find it because I literally happen to have it handy. This is how it should be done. Lodge yourself on a stratum, experiment with the opportunities it offers, find an advantageous place on it, find potential movements of deterritorialization, possible lines of flight, experience them, produce flow conjunctions here and there, try out continuums of intensities, segment by segment. Have a small plot of new land at all times. Guys, that is your strategy for preempting and avoiding and resolving burnout. That's all. It's just as simple as that. That's all you have to do. But that is truly how I feel like I have battled it. Now I'm jinxing myself royally, because, like, I don't know, 6 months from now I'm going to be in some kind of like terrible, stressful kind of environment for some reason. Who knows? But you don't strike me right now as being stressed. And you don't actually
call it that
as being exhausted. What you described sounds to me that just the stuff that's bringing you joy is bringing you just slightly less joy, because the labor it takes to engage in those activities is right now it's costing a little bit more than the joy is replenishing. So you just got to rest. Even a professional athlete doesn't play, a game every day.
Right. That's it. And I think where this is showing up the most is the stuff is sitting in my inbox, or DMs are hanging unread a little bit longer, just because I'm resisting this at the moment for anything else. Now, normally those things would pop up. Not normally, but on the wave peak, shit, this, I need to engage in these. What opportunity is here? There's something cool that's going to come from these conversations and these connections, and there's new information in here somewhere that I can just start gorging. Well,
I feel like unlucky that we're getting to the close of when we have to be done. But you said, when you were describing earlier, you said one of the things that energizes you, or that you're kind of after in a lot of this, is, you said enthusiasm, but then I think you made a good point to say, but enthusiasm can take the form of, arguing, you just engaging. You just want, you want that engagement, and you want it to be a really authentic engagement. And, that comes with the territory of it being outside of yourself. So what does it for you is something that actually requires somebody else to be involved and reacting in a way. And so, on one hand, I think there's that is part of the trade-off. A lot of what makes me tick is stuff that might not require another human. I hate to say it. I wouldn't be happy in a cave as a hermit per se, but like I might be one of those people who's more cut out for it than others. So I don't need or feel as much of a drive to. I love when you get that lean in moment. I mean, I love all of that as much as you do, but it's like when it's missing for me, my levels don't go down. They just stay where they are rather than getting the bonus of when they are there. And so you have that, I don't know, misfortune of one of your like sources of energy from something that's outside of yourself, like the concept of a locus of control being outside of yourself, except not quite the same. The other side to that I also hear is that, is there, you mentioned at one point, a tolerance? If this is like a drug, right? Do you need to take a tolerance break? You know, people who smoke pot all the time and any kind of drug, I go with something a little bit not as hard and problematic to discuss, but if you use THC for any reason, recreationally or medicinally or whatever, every day, which I don't, and I'm not actually a big user of these things in general, but I have plenty of friends who do, and they have to take tolerance breaks because you, even if what you're getting from it is an overall benefit, you know, the tolerance you build up, it's a weird metaphor, but if the thing that is bringing you energy and joy has the ability to develop a tolerance, and we're talking about a reduced sensitivity as this theme that we've been talking about over the last few episodes around sensitivity, instead of trying to cultivate a new level of sensitivity to something that wasn't there, in this case it feels like, how do you regain your sensitivity to something that maybe has been reduced? And for something like a drug or drug metaphors, it's by taking a break from it, so you come back fresh. You know, or let's go safer, like coffee. People I know who quit drinking coffee for a little while or do dry Januaries, you know, whatever, and they get a little bit more of a rush out of it when they come back to it. And so I hear a little bit of that. That to me is the same as like, I'm stressed, you know, I like have too much work to do, I'm burnout and I hate my job. Like that garden variety burnout, that ain't it. But I don't know if that resonates.
It does, and it actually kind of ties into your metaphor with eating too, because there's also this component of you know, when we eat more artificially flavored food, or the stuff that has like the heavy sodium in it, it's overblown with all sorts of overstimulating sensory shit. Then we go and like eat a salad or drink some water, and it's like it has no flavor at all, or it just feels plasticky. It's not that it's necessarily junk food that's created that environment. It's just the hyperstimuli that's created it. And so that's probably a bit of it too.
It took us an hour, and now we've just opened the door on the part of this that I think is probably the richest, which is like, you know, I don't know why I went straight to drugs and alcohol, but I was like, it's like sugar, you know, like basic sugar. If you like you said, junk food, salt, sugar. When I was in Japan, I probably have talked about this, but I will never ever forget how much I was struck by the week and a half I was in Japan. After a couple days of eating their food, which is far lower levels of sugar and salt, all I could like marvel at was just how amazing everything tasted, you know? And then I came back to the States, and like the first thing I ate, and I'm not a big junk food person anyway, but just a normal food item, I was like, oh my god, this is too sweet. I think I had soda. I think I had a sip of like full sugar regular soda, and I was like, I can't handle this. I was one of those people for a week where I was like, oh no, that's too much sugar for me. Then I worked back up to my American level of tolerance, and all was well. But like that's okay, so let's put the pin in that. Maybe we pick that up even at some point, because the concept of burnout tied to notions of sensitivity could be very interesting, especially as it ties to the other stuff we've been talking about with sensitivity. And on that note, I'm going to draw us to a close because I got to go to another phone call. All right? All right.
All right. This is fun.